Good evening, Rhonda.
Good evening, everyone.
We're still trying to start up this machine.
Okay, you are indeed live now.
Welcome, everybody, to the 16 January 2024 meeting of the Annapolis Transportation Board. Thanks to you who joined us. Couldn't go anywhere else because of the snow, huh? But we are missing a number of people and do not have a quorum at the moment, although that may change as we go through the meeting. Therefore, I will simply step through the agenda that was distributed for informational purposes, and I'll skip those items that require a vote. We have been called to order. The roll call is accomplished by simply looking at the screen. Our secretary is, yes, with us, so we're okay. The agenda I'm following, the minutes will not be voted on. Although you have them, we won't vote on them because we don't have a quorum. There is no public participation. The next item on the agenda is from the City Council, and we have 2 alderpersons present. The meeting is yours for any update you would like to provide.
Thank you so much. I will start really quickly. We do not have a lot to report, but last week at our transportation meeting, committee meeting, we had folks from Premium Parking on hand to answer questions in regards to the meeting that we'd had in November. There was a joint meeting with Finance and Transportation, and several residents had brought up some issues that were going on in the city, specifically with Noah Hillman Garage and with residential parking. And there are several things that they are changing and altering, and in the process of changing and altering, one of them being that really long digital code necessary for the residents' 2-hour free parking. Hopefully by March, we will have a much shorter codes and an easier way for residents to get the 2-hour free parking. They're also working on streamlining the residential parking process and making it easier for residents who have the residential parking permits to utilize their guest passes, their contractor passes, and their visitor, which I guess is their guest passes, but their visitor overnight passes. So they're streamlining those, and they are in the works to put together a focus group to further discuss ways that they can make the residential parking program simpler, easier to use, and more friendly to all who are using it. We also discussed the 2 pieces of legislation that this board reviewed, the 03023 and 03123. And we tabled any decisions on moving it forward back to the council as our law office is doing some language tweaks on it. So that's my update.
Thank you. Do you have anything, Alderwoman Pindell Charles?
No, I have nothing to add. Thank you so much, Alderwoman O'Neill.
All right. Thanks for that. Couple of things. It still continues to befuddle me that any code whatsoever needs to be entered. It seems to me that there ought to be a system which, if a resident has registered with the city as a resident with the parking people, so they have our license number, they know our identity, and they could even collect a credit card for that matter. But since the license plates are scanned, you would think that as you drive in, the computer would be able to recognize you as a resident, qualify you in the computer as a qualified resident eligible for 2 hours of parking, and be done with it. So it continues to amaze me that any entry of anything is required. Have you thought about that?
It was one of the things that we asked them, and apparently it's possible. What needs to happen is they have a code that they're using. Let's call it a code. They have ownership of said software code, and they're trying to figure out how to best utilize that software and the coding system that comes with it.
One of the witnesses from Ward 1 suggested that their ownership of the code does not also imply that they are able to modify it. That is, they've got this software and may be unable to modify it to suit our requirements. That's what I got reading between the lines of both the testimony of this witness from Ward 1 and the response from the parking people.
And that's what I have been led to assume as well. I agree there's opportunity there for change. And I think it's really just drilling down to who needs to change that code, how does it need to be changed in order to best utilize the digital process at hand. I mean,
right. Yeah, good point. And then finally, I still don't know. This question was brought up several times, but I don't think anybody, including you, got an answer. And that is it true that delay in implementing a system which gives proper credit to city residents generates money which is collected by premium parking rather than by the city? That is there a financial incentive for them to delay in solving this problem?
I actually don't think that there is a financial incentive. We've asked the question before, like, what happens if we just get rid of you? We can't just get rid of them, unfortunately, because they're in the public-private partnership agreement.
No, that isn't exactly what I was asking. You know,
Right.
if you walk in and you want to get 2 hours of free parking and it doesn't happen, so you have to pay the regular commercial rate, I presume premium parking collects those funds.
They do, but we've had so many cases where we've actually refunded because of one reason or another that they're not making any additional funds. I have asked for the finances of up to date. So since they opened, what was it, June 14th?
Mhm.
I've asked for an accounting of what's been brought in, what has been refunded, and where we stand. And I am awaiting that. So hopefully that will be forthcoming in the next week or two.
Okay, good. And then finally, I guess I wanted to ask about I've lost one other point and I don't have it here in my notes. I guess I will come back to that. But oh yes, the $50 fines, which have been levied in large numbers, I gather, from people who couldn't figure out the system or overstayed. Are those fines continuing to be levied under the system, or have they suspended that for the time being?
What I was told was that the margin of error is less than 2%, meaning less than 2% of the people coming into the garage are either not paying or not paying correctly. I believe that if you do go into the garage and you don't pay at all, you are fined, but it's less than 2% of the owners that are doing that.
And who collects the fine? Does the city collect the fine, or does premium parking?
Premium parking collects the fine.
Do they keep it, or is it remitted to the city?
I don't know the answer to that.
Again, I'm trying to alert you to this matter of financial incentives. What do they have an incentive to do? And if they have if the company collects these fines rather than the city, that's a pretty good financial incentive for them to take their time in solving the problem. That's all. Okay. Anybody else have anything on this point? All right. Annapolis Transportation Department, Kwaku is here, I see.
Yeah, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have any updates at this time. I did talk to the director, and he did not give me anything. Apparently, there has been some discussions of the parking issues, which Alderwoman O'Neill has been able to actually talk about that. Otherwise, there is nothing really new happening at this time, apart from just trying to provide the services that we have been doing. Unless somebody has a question for me, I'll be happy to answer.
All right, thank you very much. We have a quorum present here now. Vince has joined us. And so what I'd like to do is to backtrack on the agenda and go back to approval of the minutes. They were distributed. Can we have a motion to adopt the minutes, to accept the minutes, and then vote on it?
Motion.
All right, is there a second? I see a second, thanks. All those in favor of adopting the minutes as distributed? I see a majority. Thank you so much. The minutes are adopted. All right, the next point that I want to cover is board membership has not changed. We continue to have 3 vacancies. The next item on the agenda is the annual report. I just remind you that we must every January complete an annual report and submit it. And I will do that. I will basically digest all of the minutes that we have produced through the year into a concise summary of what has happened during the year, distribute it to you for your approval, and then submit it on behalf of the Transportation Board to the city. The next item is, the other January item is that we have.
Excuse me, Kurt.
Yes.
Kurt, have you thought of trying to use AI to do that? It's apparently very good at doing exactly that.
That's
Taking a
wonderful.
voluminous material and summarizing it in a page or two.
Yes, that's great. That would be an interesting experiment. I had, by the way, the only experience I have is watching over my son's shoulder. This generative AI thing, which I think I have on my cell phone too. He sat down. He's a 30-year-old. You know, he sat down. He said, "I wonder what it would be like if I asked it to write my obituary." and it wrote a pretty good obituary. It was quite complete and grammatical, and made all of the right points. It went out and scraped the web and put together my young son's obituary. So that's the only experience I have with it. But it's a good idea. Thank you, Ed. So I'll do the annual report. We have 3 elective positions on the board: chair, vice chair, and secretary. I'll start with the chair. I've been doing it for 3 years, and frankly, I would not object if somebody has enthusiasm and a desire to lead this group. I would step aside with pleasure. I'm willing to continue for the time being, but in light of the fact that I've been doing it for as long as I have, I think it may be appropriate to consider others. And so I ask you to think about that for a moment. And if there's anybody here who would like to take on that role, speak now. The other two positions are the vice chair and secretary. Our secretary has done a fantastic job. It's always with guilt that I ask anybody to continue this function because it's very important and not a lot of fun.
Willing to give it up, but doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to continue.
Well, I would love.
It's sort of hard when we've got so few people on to rope people in here, Kurt.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. And we don't even have any whips or other weapons to threaten people with. So, no, if you're willing to continue, that would be fine. And I'm sure it would meet with everybody's approval. So why don't we get that out of the way right now? Is there a nomination for our secretary?
I'll nominate Tara.
Right, a second. I see a second with Ed. All those in favor? With enthusiasm, I push up my hand. Yes, it appears to be unanimous. All right. The next is chair and vice chair. Are there any nominations for chair before we go on to the vice chair? And feelings will not be hurt if any of you nominate either yourselves or somebody else.
I would nominate Kurt.
I'll get you for that.
I'll second that.
All right. All right. Are there any other nominations? All right. In that case, let's have a vote. All of those in favor of the nominated person to be chair, raise your hand. I guess I will accept. All right. Thanks very much. Thank you for your vote of confidence. However, I renew my invitation to you to think about this because even a month or two into the future, I'm happy to step aside for somebody with more energy and fresh ideas. Now, for vice chair, we've had a wonderful vice chair, but I will take nominations for a vice chair from this point forward.
Tom, did you want to do it still for another year? Or did you want to?
I'm in the same boat as you, Tara. I can continue, but would be certainly happy to support another resource in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, it is challenging with so few people on to really walk through all this. And certainly, you know, I guess I should have remembered we do this every January, but anybody new to the board might realize that this conversation would come up and be sort of settled in the same meeting. So I'll just add to the notes, Kurt, that, you know, if we continue and Tom gets voted in as vice, that anyone seeking interest or anybody wanting to share their interest in these roles, you know, could speak up at any interim point.
Yes. Yes, you can all engage in a mutiny at any time during the year. That would be fine. All right, thanks very much. In that case, having heard a nomination, did I hear a nomination? You are nominated, are you not, Tom?
I guess so.
I'll nominate Tom.
All right. And was there a second? Yes, Ed, thank you. All those in favor of continuing Tom as vice chair? Okay, it appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Next item. Hugh Hayes was to have presented on this bicycle trail across the Naval Academy Bridge. He's not here tonight, so I would like to postpone that until the next meeting. He and I will work on final language to circulate among us all to state the position of the board on that subject. You
Hey,
heard,
Kurt,
yes?
First of all, apologies for being late. I've actually been at my desk since the appointed time and I'm having technical difficulties. That's why I'm on my phone. So apologies to everyone for my lateness and for my hand connection attempts there. Do we have a minute to talk about something that the State Highway Administration said last meeting that stuck with me?
Yes.
And what they said at the time was, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, which typically I understand and I endorse that philosophy. With traffic, however, considerations, I don't know that I subscribe to that philosophy. In other words, I had raised the objection that having a divided and two-way path on one side of the bridge that ended on the other side of the bridge posed a hazard to cyclists and to pedestrians. And my concern is that the average cyclist coming down that bridge is going to be approaching 30 miles an hour, and they're going to be approaching a counterflow situation as the State Highway Administration laid it out. So I guess there's two questions. One, should we talk about this kind of thing now in general, and then should we talk about it specifically? Because I don't know what the answer is, and I don't want to be an impediment to progress, but I also have concerns about that, what was proposed and kind of that attitude of it's better to have something than nothing, because I'm not convinced that that's always the case when pedestrian and cyclist safety is involved.
You and I are in perfect agreement on that. I think regardless of these practical considerations, and I acknowledge they exist, we should make a recommendation that we feel is correct. And if it cannot be executed for financial or other reasons, that is the way the chips fall. But I think we should be advocating positions that we believe to be correct.
Okay, I mean, just from their presentation, I continue to have deep concerns about having a counterflow on either side of the bridge or at the intersection that causes people to me make what would be counterintuitive forward motion decisions.
Okay, great, very good. I think we don't need to go into the details in this meeting, but I do suggest that you and I and Hugh get together to finalize what we think is the correct recommendation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. The next item is also a legislative item. That's the parking 3023 and 3123, which Karma spoke about.
May I interrupt? I'm sorry, Kurt. We're having heating issues, and I'm going to leave the meeting, and I will pick it up from here on the YouTube and do the minutes. And I apologize for the disruption.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
I do want to, I was a little unhappy at what appeared to be Rob Savage's out of hand dismissal of our recommendation concerning Parking District 5. And so I recommend that the city continue to consider that. If you read the legislation, it is not cast in terms of a plebiscite, which is voted on by residents. It's couched in terms of need. If there is a need for a parking district because there is a shortage of parking, then parking districts are created. And we have provided information that I think is persuasive that in West Annapolis, there is no need for on-street parking, which is not already satisfied by off-street private parking. And so I commend the city to carefully consider that matter of need. And that's the only point that I wanted to make on that.
Can I speak to that a second?
You bet.
I will say that I also, in that meeting last week, said that that particular line item that you had suggested we would table, because the city did a survey of West Annapolis residents last summer, in talking about the District 5, and the results of that survey was overwhelming that the residents wanted to hold off on making any change until they had several opportunities to view the new restaurants coming in and the impact those restaurants were having on parking in the streets. And since today was the first day that Chesapeake Wharf has been officially open, that basically that review starts today, because now Chesapeake Wharf is open, Agave is open, and while I thought that there would be a longer time in between the closing of Flamont and the opening of Ingrano, I heard that Ingrano opened this past weekend in a soft opening. So we now have the 3 major new entities to review for the next 4 to 6 months, and seeing how that parking goes along with the neighborhood traffic. So that survey that was taken, the residents overwhelmingly said, please wait before you make any changes until we see what this does to the parking situation.
By the way, I'm curious about the survey. I'm a resident and I never saw a survey. So who took the survey?
It was put on the city website. It was published through social media outlets, through the West Annapolis Civic Association, the West Annapolis Business Association. And I believe that it was put on flyers, but I could be wrong on that. It was up for almost 6 weeks in the summer. And I can see if it's still on the city website. Would guess that they shut off comments, but I can find out if it still is.
Well, it's interesting. I suspect most residents of West Annapolis did not fill out. I wonder how many responses were there. You probably don't know, do you?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
Yeah.
I can find it.
My guess is that the number of respondents was quite low. But be that as it may, it seems problematic that we are preserving a parking district against the future possibility of a parking problem rather than the demonstrated existence of a parking problem. And so I continue to ask you to think about that. Even if there is a parking problem that requires the use of additional city streets, the data presented in our summary to you show that there is off-street parking to serve all of the residents of the area. So if it's not a residential parking problem that we are solving, it may be some other problem, but it's not a problem of parking for residents. Virtually everybody has a private driveway and or a private garage in West Annapolis. So it's not like Ward 1. It's not like portions of Eastport. It's quite different. Okay, moving on from that, the next item is bicycles. For the 3rd time, this matter of bicycles on sidewalks is going to the state legislature. It has passed twice in past years. That is changing the default in the state legislation, in the state ordinance regarding the use of bicycles on sidewalks. It is presently forbidden unless allowed, and we have asked, and the state House of Delegates twice has approved switching that from forbidden unless allowed to allowed unless forbidden. This time, for the first time, we have a co-sponsor for cross-filing the same legislation in the state Senate. So the same bill will be introduced in both the House of Delegates and in the state Senate. And since there was no opposition in the House of Delegates, I think it's unlikely there will be opposition in the Senate. We have an excellent chance of finally getting this thing through the state legislature. There will be testimony on the 31st of January. I plan to develop testimony, and if any of you would like to participate in that, let me know. And I think we've got a good chance of finally getting this. The rest of the state will be like Annapolis. The co-sponsor in the Senate is Jeff Waldstreicher. And in the House of Delegates, it's Delegate Dana Jones. That's our agenda, apart from new business with activity reports by members. So I'd like to just cycle through the list, and each of you will have your opportunity to say anything you like and introduce new items for our consideration. Taylor is not here. Beth is not here. Tom Schock.
Thanks. So I just have one question, and I'm open to get an answer from you, Kurt, Rhonda, or Karma. What's the process as for me as a member of this board or as just a citizen to initiate an evaluation of the intersection at Chinkapin, Old Forest, and 665?
Don't
Um,
know.
there have been several studies that have been put forth about the intersection. The state is working on something. The city is working on something. We had a elected officials meeting, I think it was last summer. There have been small groups meeting, and the point person in the mayor's office is Brian Callahan in the mayor's office. I have not received an update since the meeting that we had with the elected officials. I think it was in the summer or early fall. I don't have any information on my hands right now, but I would suggest, do you have Brian's email address, Mr. Callahan's email address?
I can certainly track it down. So following up with him would be the next best step.
Following up with him would be he's the point person within the city and the mayor's office. So
Okay.
no, there are two separate, my understanding from last I heard, two separate studies going on the state side and one on the county side, because of course, Forest Drive is a county roadway and Aristide Allen Boulevard is a state roadway and Chicopee Round Road is a city roadway.
Hmm.
And so we've been involved in it, but Brian, I think Brian's been to maybe 3 meetings. We've had maybe 1 or 2, but they were doing some work ahead of time before they met with us. So I can email it to you after this meeting if you'd like me to. First, I can try to maybe dig up some preliminary information and forward it to you and introduce you to Brian.
That's okay. I'm familiar with Brian. I can ping him if he's like the next best person, but understood on the confluence of city, county, and state. I can imagine the complexity associated with that.
Tom, I have a question for you, Tom. What is the issue that you are trying to address? What is the concern?
It's an intersection that does not work very well. It's not very safe, and it's got a ton of pedestrian traffic and a lot of vehicular traffic. That whole little circle, if you were from this ward, you'd be familiar with it. It's just concerning. There's a lot of cross pedestrian traffic between one side of Chinkapin and the other, right adjacent to that intersection. And at peak traffic flow times, there's a lot of backed up traffic, and it just looks like a recipe for fatal accident at some point in the future without some remediation.
Yeah, I asked that because as a citizen of the county or the city, since 665 is the main road, and normally the state will be the overseer, so to speak, of that particular intersection, you can, with your backup information, actually request the state for a review of the traffic over there, or that the safety of the intersections, and they should be able to respond to that. So I have seen and also known that an individual can request, say, the state or the city, if it is city-owned intersection, to evaluate it from a safety point of view based upon your observations and things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
The
Sure.
other thing is, Tom, your Fairfax Road Community Association President, Ms. Simeo, she's gotten information from me, updates since she's your president. So I've sent it to the Community Association presidents and kept them in the loop as well. So you can,
Okay.
contact her as well, and she can give you the last update she's had. But thank you, Dr. Dua.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. John Giannetti is not here. David DeQuinzio is not here. Vince Harriman?
Nothing other than what I already said. I'm concerned that we stick to our values, make
Good.
recommendations that we all like.
I support you.
Thank you.
Hugh Hayes is not here. Edward Bergman?
Nothing to say.
Okay. Are you done with your traveling for the time being?
Yes.
All right. Zoe Johnson.
Good evening, everyone. I don't have any updates for the group.
All right. And Tara is watching us on YouTube, I think. Charles Brooks is not here, and I have nothing either. I'm at the end of my agenda unless somebody has something that we have somehow forgotten. I will take a motion to adjourn. All right. All those in favor of adjournment? Thanks so much for coming on this snowy evening. And go out there, saddle up your horses and your sleighs and enjoy the snow while it lasts.